Hi everyone, Helen Taylor here, and welcome to Inspired Radio Series. You are supernatural. I'm here with you each week for conversations and stories that awaken something within us and to contribute to the creation of a new world. My story explores past lives, karma, auras, energies, demons, dimensions, timelines, and quantum possibilities. We're going to venture beyond what we've been told is real and discover what else is possible. Through my experiences, I've learned a lot. I have learned that we are supernatural, and I'm going to be your guide. So today, we're going to get back into the stories and programs that are my book and my life. Before we start, though, I was watching a movie recently, and there was just this one statement, this comment that was made, and I just want to start with that. Anything is better than a life standing still. Isn't that beautiful? Anything is better than a life standing still. I just wanted to share that. You can sit quietly and contemplate that. I love that because it's the truth. Anything is better than a life standing still because there's a price you pay when you think that you're comfortable, when you don't want to think greater than you are, you don't want to live greater than the current life you've got. There's a price that you pay. So, anyway, let's get into it. Let's get into the book. So, I want to start off with a bit of just a disclaimer, a bit of a warning, okay? Because I am going to talk about suicide. That's another part of my journey. Um, and it's part of what we're going to get into today. We're going to get into me leaving school and starting the first quite significant relationship that I had. And I'm going to really just start to give some more insight into my story. So, in my book here, it's got one dimension of what was going on. I'm now an older version of myself, and I've got multi-dimensional aspects or ways of looking at my story. Um, what do I mean by that? Well, firstly, let me just reiterate, you are not your story. You are not. The past is gone, the past is done. You are not your story. The story is a three-dimensional kind of thing, and we are multi-dimensional. So, um, I suppose the insight that I'm wanting to share there is, when I lived my story, that was one dimension. When I experienced it all, the more I started to look back and to remember it and to work with it, that helped me to see it from another dimension. The more I told the story and repeated certain parts of the story gave me another dimension. The more I shared the story gave me another dimension. And I put a little note to myself here. The more you write your story, the more you tell your story, the more you share your story, the more you reveal the love. Okay? There's love in it, in every single part. And I know that that's going to challenge some people. And you know what? That's probably what it's designed for, is to challenge you, because if we've got a real strong grip on life and we've got a strong grip on our stories and we go, this is how it happened and this is it, then you'll never get to see it from a different dimension. There's no room for change or insight or growth or healing if we've got a tight grip on things. There's no room. So, I mean, it's part of what my energy does is usually trigger and challenge other people sometimes. And I do it with the best of intentions. And I have to say that, I'm grateful for all those people out there during my lifetime that pushed my buttons, because to me, they were brave people. Because, I was a pretty formidable person to deal with at different times in my life. And I think it took great courage for some people to challenge me and to question me. And I'm so grateful for them. Thank you, thank you, thank you to them, because they helped me to let go of that grip that I had on my stories and my life and everything else. So the more you write your story, tell your story, share your story, the more you reveal the love in it. And I'm standing now in a place in the world where I can look back at my stories with love, and I wouldn't change a thing, not a thing. Okay. And I'm just hoping that as I share it with you, you start to shine a little light on the stories in your life and start to see them from a different dimension. So, having said that, let's get into it. Let's get into it. This part of the chapter, what chapter am I in? Chapter 2, is titled Time to Leave School. So, towards the end of high school, we were all encouraged to think about what we were going to do once we left school. Towards the end of Form 4, we were all encouraged to select subjects for Form 5 and 6, subjects that reflected what we wanted to be and do after high school. I spoke with the school counsellor who was there to help us to figure it all out. I told him I wanted to be a hairdresser or a beauty therapist. Hairdressing was a 4-year apprenticeship, and beauty therapy wasn't even available in Victoria. I would have to live for 12 months in Sydney to actually get the appropriate training. I didn't know what to do. So I was encouraged to focus on secretarial studies, and I also chose legal studies. Isn't that crazy? Like, education is supposed to certainly give us certain levels of understanding of life and different areas of life, but I go to a school counsellor and he's got no insight for me whatsoever about being a hairdresser or a beauty therapist, and he just recommends that I do secretarial studies. Is that programming? I think so. I think he was running a programming of what he thought women should be doing in life. I left school and I worked at a local newsagent's while I was looking for a hairdressing job. I even did a TV interview on the morning TV show that was set up to support job seekers. It was with Channel 9 in Bendigo Street, Richmond. I was so nervous, but I did it. And I remembered that the whole neighbourhood knew it was happening, and everyone got up at 6 a.m. in the morning to watch me. I got a call from Mary Kay Cosmetics, but I did nothing about it. When I think about it, opportunities come along to us, right? And we take them, but then we got to roll with them as well. So here I was at a loss. I wanted to do hairdressing. I had been trained for 3 years through the educational system to be a secretary and do administrative stuff, right? But I still had this dream to be a hairdresser. And out of nowhere comes this wonderful opportunity to be on TV. I was scared. I was so nervous, but I did it. And I got Mary Kay Cosmetics, and I just cancelled that. And looking back at it, the reason why I did, it was my programming, because Mary Kay Cosmetics was about sales. And I didn't even realize back then that I had a great dislike and probably even resentment towards salespeople, because they all reflected my father. My father was a salesman. That's how he worked with Alcoa. He wasn't a salesman as such, but that's how I saw him. And, just this even glimmer of me being a salesperson for a cosmetic company, even though it may have been something more than that, was enough for me to shut it down. So that was subconsciously. Subconsciously, I related the job to being like my dad, and I cancelled it. They were a network marketing company, I put here, and I just didn't have the confidence to take that step. But having told you what I just did, that actually wasn't the reason. Something in the universe had shifted, and I found a hairdressing job. It was with Robert Hartley Hairdressing in Heidelberg. I started my apprenticeship, and the first thing I had to do was change my name. They already had a hairdresser working for them called Helen. It was explained that when the place got busy, people would regularly be calling out my name to do a shampoo, to rinse a colour, sweep up the floor, and it became confusing if two people had the same name. So I was the new apprentice, right? And yes, had a similar name to somebody already there. So I chose Linda. Linda was a friend of mine, so it made sense to me that I would answer to that name. Two significant things happened while I was in hairdressing. I got dermatitis on my hands. My hands were dry, red, and the skin was cracking between the fingers. It was very painful and difficult to manage. And I got to be a model on stage at a hair show. They loved my incredibly curly hair, and it was perfect for one of their new hairstyles. The show was at a venue called Leonda in Hawthorne and was hosted by Izzy Dye, who at the time was a popular TV show host and performer. I was starstruck. Backstage, I got quick instructions on how to walk the catwalk, and off I went. Lights, camera, action. It was incredible. Now look at it again, right? So I get an opportunity to go on TV, and that was for a job seeking show. And here I was then not very far into the future with another opportunity to be on stage and to meet people, right, that were in that kind of arena. Bit of a pattern, right? When you tell your story, you start to join the dots and see the patterns. So, next part of this chapter is called Broken Dreams, but moving on. Shortly after that, I finished up with Robert Hartley. It just wasn't working out. My hands were getting worse, and constant water, shampoos, and hair dyes were only making them crack and bleed even more. I was not destined to be a hairdresser. I was devastated. That dream was shattered. Now, what was I going to do? So those other opportunities, though, like being on TV and being on stage, were calling me towards something else. But my subconscious programming was terrified about being seen, about being, kind of exposed and all that sort of stuff. That was the programming of my dad that I wasn't worth it, that I had nothing to offer, nothing to say. That was all kind of running in the background, right? So those two opportunities that I had came and went very fast. And of course, now that dream of being a hairdresser was shattered because I couldn't be it. And I had no other plan in mind. So again, that subconscious programming in mine was, well, I wasn't worth it. I wasn't worth getting my dreams. They weren't worth going after because I didn't deserve to have them. So, next, I didn't have a clue. While I was unemployed, everyone encouraged me to do what was expected, to go on the dole or just get a job, anything, a checkout job at Coles. For some reason, I knew that if I did that, I would begin to walk a different path in life. And I wanted more than that. And I knew that I could not just take anything. Something would come along that was right for me. Do you see that? It's like there's this insight in me, this insight. And where does that come from? It comes from the same space that voice that told me to get out. It comes from that space. So my higher self, and my higher self being who I truly are. I truly am that consciousness, right? So she's there giving me this knowing, giving me this insight. And at 18 years old, the programming of everyone around me is going, just go on the dole. Just take any job. My mum was the one going, just be a checkout chick, do something, right? And I just knew in my heart that if I took that path, even if it was just to bridge a gap, it was going to lock me in somehow, right? I knew that, but that was again just an instinct, an insight for me. So I was just thinking something would come along that was right for me. It was really hard to hold on to that knowing when the people around you just think you're lazy or useless. Because I did, I got labeled. I got labeled. When you won't do what everybody else does, they're awful, aren't they? They just label you with all this stuff, which is supposed to be kind of trying to incentivize you and push you in a direction, but it's pretty nasty. Dad hated that I wasn't working, and Mum was the one that kept saying, just get a checkout job, get anything. I can see now, as I said, you become multidimensional. You see the stories from different points of view. My mum just wanted me to get anything because she was holding back the wrath of my father. I didn't know what was going on in the background, but he was giving her a hell of a time. And he was making it her fault that I couldn't get a job and that I was still at home reliant on them. And she was really just trying to push me to just go for anything, please, because it was going to take the pressure off her. But I didn't see all that at the time. My waiting paid off, and I started my first job in the legal field. I was a clerk and a typist for Cody Dwyer in St Kilda Road. It was wonderful. I started from the ground up, firstly as a clerk going into the city on a regular basis and learning how to file documents at the county court and the Supreme Court, how to sort out stamping at the State Revenue Office and lodging and searches at the Land Titles Office. I loved it. I also loved that I found the most amazing knitwear shop that created one-off thigh-length jumpers that I absolutely loved to wear when I went out clubbing. I would wear them with skinny jeans and pixie boots. I have no excuses for the fashion of the 80s. I quickly went up the ranks and was trained in word processing. That was when it came out in the 80s. The amazing new invention of the times. I became part of the typing pool, typing up all court documents, letters, wills, etc. Soon I went a step further to being the fill-in secretary to Mr. Cody himself. He was like God in the practice, right? Everybody sort of had a great respect for him. Kept me filled with adventure and keep me filled with adventure and learning new things, and I was at my happiest. I would come to understand later in my life that if I wasn't learning and doing something new, I would create trouble. You'll see. Do you know that about yourself? Do you know how you operate? Right? I knew that I had to be constantly reinventing myself and learning different things. And I picked things up very quickly. But as soon as I kind of mastered them or learned them to a certain point, I had to move on. And if I wasn't doing that, I did create trouble. It was at Cody Dwyer that I met Karen. We clicked immediately and started driving into work together on a regular basis. We swapped each week as the designated driver and actually had exactly the same car, a Mazda 1300. Mine was called Fate, and I called myself and anyone who drove in the car with me the Fatalistics. Can you see spirit coming through there? Fate, right? Here was a woman who pretty much thought she was an atheist at that young age and had no concept of God or anything else, calling my car Fate and anybody in it the Fatalistics. It's hysterical. Fate took me wherever I needed to go, is what I used to say. That was my slogan. And by the way, the registration number was LVE 302. Fancy that. Isn't it funny how some things just really stick in your mind? Yeah. LVE, love, which became a great theme of my life eventually. Karen was a bit of a hippie. She lived with her boyfriend in a house in Surrey Hills, and I would stay for a cuppa sometimes after work. I loved her independence and her style of living. I had never come across anyone like her up to now. She drank herbal teas, burned incense, and knew stuff about massage. She gave me a foot massage one day. It was incredible. I remember wondering how come I had no idea these sorts of things existed. Little did I know Karen was setting the scene for me to learn massage some 15 years later. That's what I meant when I first started talking about our stories. Your whole life is getting you set up for the next cycle and the next cycle and the next cycle. And when you start seeing those cycles and joining the dots, you realize that every single thing that's happened to you is just, dare I say it, perfect. And I know that that sounds really weird if you're feeling like a victim and you're stuck in a situation, but I'm telling you, it's multidimensional. And once you start to see the love in everything, it all starts to change. Chapter 3, the potential, I called it. And the first potential is Noel. It was around the same time after meeting Karen that I met Noel. However, before I get into him, let me explain the setup of my social scene at the time. My best friends were Kerry and Jan. We'd been friends from high school. Kerry loved going out and dancing just as much as I did. It was the 1980s. Nightclubs and discos were everywhere. I'm not going to apologise for this. It was such an era. We squeezed ourselves into the tightest jeans you could imagine. I remember the three of us laughing one night as Jan got dressed. She lay down on her bed with a metal clothes hanger hooked into the zip of her jeans. It was the only way she could pull the zipper all the way up. Then she had to get herself off the bed and stand up. It was hysterical. What we did for fashion. We went to the Croydon Hotel on a Tuesday night, dancing and drinking the night away, and either football clubs, the discos or clubs on a Friday and Saturday night, because the footy clubs had their own at their venues. They had clubs and discos going on as well. Kerry was a man magnet. She always wore one-piece jumpsuits with the zip at the front that got lower and lower as the night went on. She was never without a boyfriend. Me, on the other hand, still had insecurities. Or did I? I just never really saw the point of having a boyfriend. One night stands were much better. No attachment, no awkwardness, no commitment. But when I think about it now, right? I mean, if you've been listening to the other parts of this series, when it came to, my first interactions with boys, I was totally insecure and totally naive and had no one to talk about it, no one to guide me. And really, I was too scared to talk about it myself. But in the background was that whole, your father is, you know, he sets the scene for you and men in your life, right? That's daughters and fathers, daughters and fathers. It's the first hero, the first man you look up to is your father, and he sets the scene for, how you see men and how you interact with them. And I didn't have a good start with that. And that's, again, it's an observation, it's not a judgment, right? He just defined my relationship with men, and it wasn't good. It wasn't good. Okay. So that was playing in the background all the time. So my way of dealing with that was to just go, I don't want attachment. I don't want that level. So I really just shut off that level of vulnerability in myself. I love dancing though. I didn't realize at the time, but it was a form of therapy for me. When I danced, I forgot about everything else in the world. Peter and Gail, and Peter is a woman. Peter and Gail were also my friends, and I would often see them at the Croydon Hotel. It was through them that I was invited away for a camping trip to Eildon, and that's where I met Noel and the many other people who were part of his world. He was 6 years older than me, lived in a sprawling bluestone home with his parents, and had his own wing of the home. It was a huge, huge place. He had everything. That's how I saw him. The family had money. His parents and two brothers were all part of the family landscaping business, and they were all very successful. Going out with Noel opened up a completely new world for me. He showed me adventure, fast cars, camping, jet skis, boating, snow skiing, parties, different music, a whole other way of life that was truly inspiring. Can you see again? Here comes another opportunity, right? To step on that path of life that I wanted to. I've got a man that's worth a lot of money and has all these toys, being cars and jet skis and boats and all sorts of things, right? And he's interested in me, and I start going out with him. So the next part of this chapter is called Love, Drugs, and Fast Cars. We went to Bathurst for the annual car race, and we drove there in his Tirana SLR 5000, which was just the car of the days there. He challenged me to learn how to roll joints. And this was my first experience getting into the drugs and stuff. If he was going to drive the whole way to Bathurst, I had to roll joints along the way. Seemed like a fair deal to me. I had a pack of rolling papers and a pack of tobacco, and I had to roll and roll and roll until I got it right. Bathurst was amazing. We camped there along with hundreds of other people, and everyone was smoking dope. It was a whole new thing for me, so I eased myself into it. A lot of Noel's friends were also on the mountain, and we visited some of them who were all together in a large tent. They were smoking dope and making lunch, toasted sandwiches. I remember the tent was a haze of smoke, and I had a few puffs of a joint. The tent was really warm and relaxing, and I started to feel a little strange. The man making the toasted sandwiches asked me, "What do you want in your sandwich, Helen?" I couldn't speak. I just stood there. He asked me again. I still couldn't speak. Let me try and explain what was happening to me. I was having an out of body experience. My body was standing there, but I was somewhere else, kind of watching me and him. And I knew I wanted to say ham and cheese, please, but I couldn't connect with my body. He asked me again, and all of a sudden I was back in my body and I told him, ham and cheese, please. Wow, that had never happened to me before. It was such a crazy feeling. So for me, I wasn't a big drug user or dope smoker or anything like that. So I'd had a couple of puffs, but I was in a tent that was warm and enclosed, and it was filled with the haze of everybody smoking joints, right? So I had an out of body experience, and it was the craziest thing to be just going, trying to make my body answer him. And it wouldn't. And then all of a sudden it would. Wow, okay. Through Noel, I met a lot of new people, older, more mature people, because remember, he's 6 years older than me. And a lot of the time, they triggered my own insecurities. I would feel like an imposter, like a child. At parties, the others would be having conversations about things I either hadn't experienced or didn't know a lot about. One friend of his asked me to be a model. He was a photographer and was doing a shoot for a boat company. He needed a model in a bikini to take some of the boating shoots. This was a big trigger. I said no. You know, think about that, right? Another opportunity comes along. Firstly, 6 years is a big gap when you're 18 and somebody else is 24, 25, right? It's a big gap. So his friends had conversations and topics they talked about that I didn't understand, and they were making me feel inferior. Well, actually, I was, right? So that subconscious programming of mine of comparing myself to everybody and the self-judgment and self-criticism was all starting to flood out left, right, and center, you know? So it was a big trigger. And then along comes this guy, and he was all legit, photography business that he had, legit magazines that he was working for. It was all above board. And like he showed me some of the other magazines. And Noel was just so excited as a boyfriend to think that I'd been chosen to be a part of this shoot. And I just said no. And I remember seeing the disappointment on his face as well, but that was half of what was going on inside of me. You know what I'm saying? That subconscious stuff playing out. So, you know, I really thought I was going to get through quite a bit more today than what I have. I thought I was going to get up to that bit about suicide, and I haven't, and I won't because we're starting to run out of some time here. I like to keep these to about 30 minutes because that's doable in this day, isn't it? It's just doable. So I hope you've enjoyed what I've been talking about up to now, and I hope you're starting to see that the insight that I started getting along the way. I hope you start to look at your own life in the same way. Have a look at the cycles in your life and the opportunities, the missed opportunities, right? Because so many times I was being asked to get onto this other path and see the similarities. TV, the hair show, being in a magazine, being a model. It's like this whole other world was sort of running parallel to me all the time, and it kept trying to call me to take a step, right? But I couldn't. I couldn't because the programming that had been instilled in me by both my mother and my father predominantly kept playing out louder inside of me than the opportunities that came along. So those inner voices, the inner feelings and all that were far, far louder than the outside world. And I, at this point in my life, wasn't even conscious of it. Okay. I just thought that life at that point in time happened to you, at you. I didn't know that I had a choice in creating it. So, two pathways. Well, actually, it's probably many, many more than that, but you can see two pathways going on, the one I was walking and the one I was being called to walk. And I just didn't have what it took to be able to make that leap at that time. Have a look at it in your own life and see if you can see the opportunities that you missed and see where, your inner world and that programming was dictating your insecurities and your fears and things and limiting your life, limiting the opportunities. It's incredible. So I started off today by saying the more you write your story, tell your story, share your story, the more you reveal the love. And I hope that you start to do that as well. In the meantime, all my love to you, and I'll see you next week for the next episode.